Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again. Today I'm going to be doing a video that has been long awaited by me, but I'm going to review recent first impressions of eyeshadow palettes that I have done on my channel. I acquired a few over quarantine, and I did a first impressions on these three that I'm going to be talking about today. And now that I have tested them thoroughly and I've used every shade, I've really dug my fingers into them and got to know them, and I thought I would do a review. The unfortunate thing is, number one, a lot of these are older palettes, and two of them are limited edition. So we're just really producing helpful, current, and relevant videos here. So here, let's just get started. So the first palette that I tried chronologically on this channel is the Lunar Beauty Moonspell palette. Okay, well, first of all, beautiful, 10 out of 10 packaging. I mean, it's truly like a piece of art. It's just so beautiful. First of all, I kept the little slidey box thing that it came in, just because it's literally like a piece of artwork. I love it so much. It's so beautiful. It's very sturdy. It feels like very good quality. The front literally looks like a book. It has a spine. It's just beautiful. And I mean, I love Halloween. I love spooky things. I talked about this when I first tried it, but it's, for me, nothing could be better than this packaging. In terms of the actual color scheme of the palette, I know it was very hit and miss. Oops. For a lot of people. It's very reflective, so I'm gonna try to not blind you and let you also see the colors. As I was saying, I know that a lot of people didn't love this color scheme. A lot of people didn't think that it was Halloween-y or that it was cohesive, etc., etc. I actually love it. And after using it, in my opinion, it really does make sense. You have a row of purples, a row of more neutral shades, and then a row of greens. And I feel like when you actually get this on your eyes, it really does translate to be very witchy, very Halloween-y, in a kind of more modern way and a more nuanced way than just having orange and black. You know what I mean? I feel like when you really start to use this palette, you do feel those grungy, Halloween-y, witchy tones. But it's also, I mean, it's summertime now and I'm using it and I love it. I love the colors in this palette. The only thing is, I feel like I'm going to be such a broken record. I just think there's a little bit of a lack of depth. Although these shades are relatively buildable, you can build them up to really increase the depth of the pigment, but I just maybe would have wished that this brown shade here, Kiki, or this purple shade, Sabrina, were a little bit deeper. I feel like that would have really rounded the palette out better. Because also, I think when you think of witchy things, Halloween-y things, you think of deep, grungy, dark tones, and this is a little bit brighter, and I just would have liked to have one more deep shade, because I do find that I either use a black in conjunction with this to deepen up the tones, or I just grab for a deeper shade, a deeper brown or a deeper purple or a deeper green when I'm using this. I also don't really know that both the shades Piper and Phoebe were necessary. I maybe also would have switched one of these out for a deeper purple, a deeper matte purple as well. In terms of the actual formula of the eyeshadows, I think the mattes are really smooth. They blend really well. And like I said before, they are very buildable. So you can build up depth if you layer them. They are like a little bit thinner compared to some of the other palettes that I'm going to be talking about today. They're a little bit thinner, but they still, like I said, build and blend really well. The only shade that I would note is this like teal shade Nancy is a little bit less pigmented when compared to all the other shades in the palette. And I know that's been a common comment from people who have reviewed this palette, from what I've seen anyway. Although you still can build it up, it's just compared to the other shades, this one shade in particular is a little bit lighter. To me, from this palette, it seems like there are 4 different like types of shades. So you have your matte shades. There are 8 mattes in here. So you have 8 mattes and 7 shimmery shades. So within the like shimmery shades, I find that there's like 3 different formulas, I guess you could say. There's one like toppery shade that's more glittery. It's not quite as opaque, and you do have to build it up if you were going to like use this on your lid by itself. It's this shade Prue up here. It's like an iridescent purpley shade. I don't mind it. I find if you wet it or use like a glitter glue or your fingers, you can build it up to be like to work on your lid fine. It's not like something that I hate by any means. It's just like a more sheer toppery shade. Then you have more of the like sparkly metallics, as I'm choosing to call them, which seems to be kind of almost an in-between between the like sparkly topper shades and then the just traditional metallics. So the sparkly shades are this purple shade Phoebe, and then you have the shade Mary, the shade Samantha, and then the shade Hermione down here. Those are kind of like the more sparkly metallic shades. Then you have 2 like traditional metallics, pretty like standard run-of-the-mill metallics, which is the shade Piper right here, and then also the shade, what is this? The shade Fiona. I will say, out of the like sparkly metallic shades, this shade down here, Hermione, was a little bit disappointing to me because I just found that it was a little bit almost more hard pressed in the pan. It was a bit difficult to pick up, and then it also has gotten hard pan. I don't know if you can see, probably not. After using this, like I think I only used it once. It just has a little bit of hard pan. It's still a beautiful shade, for sure. It's still very, very pretty. It's just a little bit more finicky to work with. I also noticed that this shade Fiona, this teal, this metallic deep teal shade down here, did have a little bit of fallout. It's just something that I noticed throughout the day, that I had like metallic teal specks all over my face. So it's just something to keep in mind and be mindful of, although it wasn't anything like major. Just something I noticed. I also noticed that some of these shades faded a little bit on my lower lash line. I don't typically use primer or anything on my lower lash line. Sometimes I do get a little bit of fading. Usually it's nothing noticeable, but with this palette I did notice that these shades did fade, particularly on my lower lash line a little bit, and they also did crease slightly on my eyes. It wasn't anything like right away. It definitely was after wearing it for maybe like 7-8 hours. So it's not something that I'm really like going to be super mad about. It's just something that I noticed, particularly because it's not typically an issue I have. It's not typically an issue I have because my NARS primer, I usually use the NARS Smudge Proof eyeshadow base. It's like my tried and true. I usually don't have any issues with my shadows when I use that, but I did notice still a little bit of fading and a little bit of creasing. So if you don't normally prime your eyes, I would encourage you to use a primer with this palette, just because I did notice that a little. In terms of like the details of this palette, obviously you have 15 shades. It's a pretty good sized palette. You have a very large mirror, like you could easily do your entire face of makeup with this. This palette is has 18.75 grams of product, which means that there's 1.25 grams of product in these eyeshadows, which is pretty standard when I was comparing it to like my other eyeshadow palettes. It's like very much just in the middle. It's not like a super small amount of product, and it's not like, wow, these are huge eyeshadows. It does retail for $63 Canadian. I imagine that that's mostly going into like the extravagant packaging. I bought this, I think I bought this with a gift card, so I didn't personally pay for this. Would I recommend to pay full price for this? No. I would say, I know it's like limited edition. It is still available, so you can still get it if you've really like been waiting till the last possible second, which I know I do. It was a Halloween release, and like honestly, next Halloween is fucking coming up because it's already July. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's the middle of July already. So I don't know how much longer it's going to be around for. If you can wait for like some type of sale or something, I would say that's the best bet, because I don't know, like if you really, really love the color scheme and love the packaging, and like you think that like $60 is worth it, then by all means go ahead. I think the shadows perform well, very well. They're really beautiful. I love the like sparkly metallic shades. I think they're really, really special. But generally, if you're interested in, like vaguely interested in picking this palette up, I love it. Personally, I love just being able to have it and look at it. I love the color scheme. I would maybe say wait for a sale though, because it is a little bit pricier. I mean, $63 is pretty up there. So the next palette that I used on my channel, I think chronologically, is the Melt Amor Eterno Vita palette. I also have the Muerte palette. I got that I think around Christmas time, and I loved it so much, and I knew that I had to get this one as well. I bought this at the same time that I bought the Lunar Beauty Moonspell palette. I love Melt. The thing about Melt is that I feel like their packaging is always beautiful, and they just theme their products out so well, and their color schemes are always really enticing to me. I always just think their palettes are very well thought out, very intentional, and they always just really grab me, you know? This is what the palette looks like. It's just absolutely, just let's bask in the glory that is this palette. It's the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today. I have the shades Papel Picado, Agua Ardente, and Chocolat in my crease, and then I have the shade Serape on my lid. Just such a beautiful palette. Also packaging beautiful, lovely, stunning, amazing. Like I've said before, I love Melt's packaging, and this is no exception. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And to be honest, I have very few complaints with this palette. I personally love the color scheme. I think it's gorgeous. You have your really like beautiful, bright, warm oranges and reds down here. You have some beautiful like yellow, green, really bright shades, and then you have this little section in the middle that's more neutral. So I feel like this palette is super, super versatile. You can just do so many things with it, which I absolutely love. Another thing too that I love is Melt. That Melt I find always does really well is that it has a really great range of depth. So you have your lighter shades, but you also have this deep dark chocolate shade, which for me is quite deep. I think it's a really beautiful, just deep, rich brown that works with both the warm tones and the greens and the neutrals. Like it just works so well together as a palette, and once you use it more, I find you just come up with so many different looks that you can do with just these 10 shades. It also has a really great shimmer to matte ratio. There are only 2 shimmers in this palette, which I prefer because I generally prefer Melt's matte formula. I find they're really pigmented. It can be a little bit trickier to blend, I find, compared to like say the Lunar Beauty palette. You do have to finesse the mattes a little bit more, but I don't mind that because they are such just beautiful, richly saturated shadows. And when we're talking about the shimmers, I actually, interestingly enough, feel like in this palette, the shimmers are different to the normal Melt metallic formula. Even different from the Muerte palette, which I find really interesting. They're a little bit thicker and I almost like more hard press in the pan, which I don't mind because I don't always get along with Melt's metallic formula. Generally, I find it to be pretty flaky and you have to work with it a little bit more. These I don't have an issue with. I think they go on really beautifully. I don't find that they're as flaky. They're a lot smoother. And I've really been getting along with them. The only thing I will say is that this green shade over here, Serape, does stain my eyelids. I don't find that the like reds in here really stain my eyelids at all. It's particularly this green. Like when I do cut creases like I have today, I've used this a couple of times this way, and when I take my eyeshadow off, you can see like a green like a semicircle like on my lids. So just be mindful of that. I do generally have issues with like staining with usually pinks, reds, not always greens. Sometimes I think it's likely because my skin tone is just so pale that any pigment just kind of latches onto it. Personally, for me, I don't really care about staining. I don't find that it irritates my eyes at all. It just kind of leaves a little bit of that pigment residue behind. Not a super huge deal. Again, just something that I thought I would mention. So like I said, you have 10 shades in here. There's 17.7 grams of product in total, which means that there's 1.77 grams of eyeshadow for each shade, which actually, when you compare it to other palettes, is a lot of shadow. You wouldn't think it because these pan sizes don't look like, when I look at them, I don't think, wow, these look like huge shadows, you know, but it actually is quite a bit of product, and it retails for 76 Canadian dollars. So Melt palettes they're pricey. They're very pricey, but they just keep drawing me in because they're just so good. I just love Melt's color schemes so much. I'm a huge Melt fan. Do I think this palette is worth $76? Maybe not. I would also say wait for a sale for this one because it's not limited edition, I don't believe. So wait maybe until you can get some kind of discount on it. If you're interested in this color scheme, I think the shadows perform really well. It's just a really beautiful palette and I'm so happy to have it. I did do a review on the Muerte palette as well. I would encourage you never to watch that video because it's so bad. I'm going to do swatches of all these palettes and I'm on my arm, and I'm also going to force my girlfriend to let me swatch these palettes on her arm as well because she has a deeper skin tone, and I think it would be helpful for you guys to see that, obviously, to be able to provide swatches on a deeper skin tone because I am so fucking pale, and also it will be helpful for me just to see how they actually work on a skin tone that's deeper than mine. Okay, so the last palette that I tried out recently is the Dominique Cosmetics Rustic Glam palette. First of all, the packaging in all of these palettes is just beautiful, but there's something about the Dominique Cosmetics palettes that I just find so satisfying. It's such a beautiful palette, and it's a pretty large palette. Like if you compare it to the Melt one, it's very large, it's long and wide. So in terms of the color scheme, I have a lot of opinions. I think it's really unique. Again, if I say this once, I say it 1,000 times. I do think that there is a slight lack of depth. I think that this suede shade could have been a little bit deeper, although you do have a black. I will forever die on the hill that palette should have blacks in them. I'm a huge proponent of having blacks in palettes because you can mix it with your shadows to create more depth without, you don't have to use it as just like packing it on your lid for a black smoky eye. I think it's so helpful because you, like I said, you can mix it with shadows to make them a little bit deeper without changing their color too much. I just think it's so valuable. So you do have that black, and I think that makes this palette a lot more versatile. And after using this palette more, I actually think that the colors do work well together, and you can create a lot of different variations of looks. The only thing that I would say is that I just feel like the shade Wildflower, this pink shade at the very end over here, doesn't quite fit in to the palette. Here's the thing. Okay, what if you replace that shade with a deep green? Right? Perfect. Right? Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. It would be beautiful. I just feel like it works well. Like, it's a beautiful pink shade, but I just feel like this suede shade is a little too light and a little too warm to really like create more depth in the crease. And then you can mix it with the black, but it is such a light shade that it gets a little bit dusty because the black does have a hint of blue to it. So I just feel like it doesn't quite fit. I think it's a pretty shade on its own. I just don't find for me, don't feel like it works as well with the other shades as I would maybe like it to. In terms of the actual formula of the shadows, the mattes are pretty powdery. So there is a lot of kick up in this palette, like when you initially tap your brush in, and I don't really ever feel like that's an issue for me normally. Like, I don't really care, but it is so much that even I notice it. The only reason that would bother me is just because it's such a waste of product, you know, like I feel like I'm blowing away half of the eyeshadow. So if that's something that's really gonna bother you, just keep that in mind. There are, I think, like there's actually 4 different types of formulas. So you have your traditional matte shades. So you have 7 of your traditional mattes. So the shade Fringe, Evil Eye, Free Spirit, Cactus, Wildflower, Suede, and Desert Queen. Those are all just mattes. They are quite thick. It's just something that I've noticed, like they feel very thick when you swatch them and when you apply them on your eyes. They do blend out very well. They don't like get patchy. They're nicely pigmented. Like, I think they're really nice matte shades. Then you have 2 like more traditional metallics. So the shade Bohemian and the shade Wanderlust are both like just traditional bright metallic shades. They are really beautiful. They're very creamy, very bright, very reflective. I do notice that they do emphasize texture in my eyelid a little bit more than normal like metallic shades. So if you have textured eyelids, that's something to keep in mind if that bothers you. At this point, I've just accepted that sometimes my eyelids look old and wrinkly and I just can't be bothered to care anymore. And then you have sequin shades. So here's the thing. I fucking hate sequin shadows. I think they're so stupid, honestly. Essentially, they're mattes with like specks of glitter in them. And while they do swatch beautifully, they look really sparkly, they just don't perform on the eyes the way that you want them to, unless you like pack them onto your lid and don't blend them at all. Otherwise, they just perform as mattes. So the shade Dreamcatcher and the shade Moonchild, it's these 2 shades right here. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but they're essentially mattes with glitters. And like I said, they just perform as mattes. If you just tap your brush in and tap them off, they perform as mattes. The only way that I really see any of the sparkle is if I set my liner with Moonchild, then you can kind of see some of the blue sparkle, but other than that, not really. I'm not mad at that. I would have preferred these shades to be just matte anyway, so not mad at it. Then you have this purple shade down here, and this is more of like a metallic shade that's not quite as reflective as the other two metallic shades, and it does have like more obvious particles of glitter and sparkle in them. Now, this is a little bit of a controversial shade. I'm not going to say the name of it. If you want to look it up for yourself, you can. It is considered to be a racial slur. Honestly, when I bought this palette, I thought that for some reason the name had changed, and then I got it and I was like, oh. I guess for a smaller indie brand, because Dominique Cosmetics is a smaller indie brand, it would be very expensive to like change every single like unit carton or whatever this is called, like to change the name on every single palette. I don't know. So just know that going into this, I don't feel comfortable saying that. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to like star the name if ever I use it, but I just thought I'd let you know this purple shade is definitely a different formula. It's fine. It's still very smooth, creamy. It is still reflective. It's just not as reflective as the other two metallic shades. So this palette obviously has 12 shades in it. The pan sizes do appear to be quite big, but each shade is 1.4 grams of shadow. So even though like it appears as though these like shadows are like extra big, they don't actually have like an exorbitant amount of product. It's like it's not a small amount of product, but it's not like you're getting like super like extra amount of shadow. It's just like a normal amount of shadow. I think it's probably just like wider pans, and you do have a mirror in here as well. And this is $58 Canadian. I'm pretty sure, no, I know. I bought this in the last Sephora sale. Would I recommend you to pay full price for this either? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's worth necessarily $58 on sale. I would encourage you to pick it up. I just think it's such a unique color story and one that we don't see that often. And the thing is, when you use this palette, that I think is the most like special about it is that you can just do so many different looks with it, you know? And I think that goes for all of the palettes that I'm talking about today, but especially this palette. I think you have just so many different avenues that you can go down, and I think that's really special for a palette because that's not necessarily always the case. Like you can do a like beautiful blue look, you can do a more neutral orangey tone look, you can do a green look, you can do like a purple and pink look, you can also like combine all the shades and, you know, and do variations of that. And because you have a black, you have so much more flexibility and you can really like play with the depth. And I don't know, I really like this palette. And I do have the Dominique Cosmetics Berries and Cream palette. I don't know if I'm going to do a video on it. I think I just might, because why not? It is a bit of an older palette, and so is this one. This is limited edition. However, this is one of those limited edition items that's been around for like forever. So I don't know if it's gonna be like they're never gonna end up like letting this go or what. But I do think it's like probably her most unique palette, and I don't have anything like this in my collection. I think it's really pretty, and if you're interested in trying this formula, I would say try it out. All right, everyone, that wraps it up. I know that I've been talking forever, so we're just gonna try to keep this outro short. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I love eyeshadow. I love talking about eyeshadow, and I love talking to you guys about eyeshadow because no one can tell me to shut up because you guys are a camera right now, and I can just talk at you for however long I want to. Anyway, let me know if you are interested in any of these palettes, if you have them, what you think of them. I would actually love to know. Let me know if there's anything you want to see from me in the future, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!